This is Dr. Holly Batchelder. Today I'm with my friend, Dr. Jennifer Chain. We're going to have a really awesome conversation today. It's about caregiving roles and overfixers, and specifically related to Dr. Chain's practice and what she does here in Seattle, Washington. And I would love to hear maybe briefly about your journey into psychology and what kind of inspired you on this topic specifically.
Thank you, Holly, for having me as a guest. Your podcast is so wonderful. I really appreciate all the guests you've had and the conversations you have about, what it's like to be human, really. So it's such a pleasure to be here. To your question of how did I get started in psychology, I think very much related to my own journey and my own experiences of growing up across cultures. So I was born in China, kind of grew up both in the States as well as in China, back and forth a little bit. And that experience, as well as a lot of family dynamics and some trauma experiences of my own, got me really curious about how people are resilient, how people really overcome challenges, and how they can thrive despite a lot of the adversity that they've been through. So that led me down the path of mental health and psychology, and here we are today. And I'm also really curious and interested about this topic of helpers and givers and fixers who overgive to the point of exhausting themselves, maybe self-sabotaging a bit, and then ending up feeling lonely, burnt out, that they're always people-pleasing for other people and over-functioning in other roles, probably depressed and anxious, and having very unsatisfying lives and unsatisfying relationships. One is because I really see myself in those roles and have worked really hard in my personal life to overcome that pattern, to really understand it and to overcome it and to change it in my life. And also, seeing that as a theme in the clients that I see and becoming really interested in that, as well as seeing that as a theme in our field, in our colleagues. As therapists, we tend to be the overgivers. And sometimes I think that really contributes then to a pattern and an imbalance I see in our society of having overgivers and then overtakers. And the overtakers are not very motivated to change that pattern, right? So if you're receiving a lot, that is a fantastic place to be. But then we have this imbalance, people who are overtaking and then people who are overgiving. So I'll pause there for right now.
How does one know if they're one or the other? Is it something is it a trait? Are there different periods of our life where sometimes we're an overgiver and sometimes we're an overtaker? I'm so curious about maybe what patterns you've seen or how we might know if we fit into one of those categories.
It's a great question. So I really like Stephen Karpman's drama triangle model. Have you heard of that one before?
I don't think I've revisited it in a while.
Yeah, I don't think it's as popular as it used to be. He created in the 1960s. He's a psychiatrist, created the transactional analysis is what he calls it. And the drama triangle, I feel like, is a very intuitive model to look at and helps explain what roles we're playing and how we know that we're there. And so the drama triangle is, if you can imagine in any sort of our life's dramas and in our TV shows and in our favorite reality shows even, right? There is the hero, there is the villain, and there's the victim, right? So the hero tends to be the rescuer. These are the helpers. And then the villain tends to be the persecutor. So these are the people who tend to be portrayed as more aggressive, attacking, blaming others. Sorry if you're hearing a little noise. That's my dog on the side there. He always likes to join in on the meetings. And the villains or the persecutors are blaming other people for the terrible things that are happening, not taking accountability for what is happening. And then there's the victims who tend to be attacked and blamed by the persecutor or by the villain. Right? And then the hero in these stories tend to want to swoop in and rescue the victim from the situation. Right. And the interesting thing about the drama triangle is that we can play all three roles at any point in time. We can even play them within like one conversation, like we can switch around.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So we could go from, being in the victim role. Oh, I can't believe somebody like cut me off in traffic today and I almost hit another car and isn't that terrible? To now being the persecutor, people should really be a little bit more careful and why are Seattle drivers so terrible, right? And then we can also switch to the rescuer of like, oh, that poor person, I almost hit them and I should be more, thoughtful next time and whatever it is. So we can really switch around in these positions, but all three of them have something in common, which is that all three of them feel quite helpless in being able to change their circumstances. And it's from that place of helplessness that they get really stuck, that we get really stuck when we're in those roles. So when you're asking, am I being an overtaker or an overgiver, we can generally kind of get a sense, are we feeling quite helpless in this place? And if we're feeling helpless, how are we reacting to that helplessness? How are we acting from that place? Are we trying to rescue somebody else and therefore feel a little bit more empowered in doing that? Or are we staying in a place of feeling quite victimized and therefore getting a lot of attention, a lot of help?
Yeah, I had like a gasp when you said that. Even in one conversation, you can find yourself in all of that. I think about that a lot in motherhood. I've
Mm,
seen myself in all those roles. Like the villain part is definitely like why society doesn't have better
yeah.
support for childcare
Yes.
for new moms in general. The victim part is like related to birth trauma and things just not working out as they could have, just the fear of all
Mm,
of it. And then I think the hero part and the overgiving is really wanting to do everything perfect for my children, trying to give them a better life than
mhm,
I had, and then
mhm,
feeling like this overprotectiveness from for women, whether they have children or not, just like for their health. Now that I've
mm,
faced some like pretty severe health issues because of
mm,
pregnancy,
yeah.
wanting to protect all women, like please either don't have kids or if you do X, Y, and Z and check this. And so I've what's so fascinating is getting stuck in that helplessness part and realizing, either one of those being kind of, almost like learned helplessness or feeling hopeless. It's totally
Mhm,
what contributed to my own postpartum depression. I know this is like really jumping into it, but our time is short. So I'm so
mhm,
curious if someone finds himself, like myself, realizing that they're
mhm.
in that kind of helplessness part, how do they get out of it? What can they do? What are the kind of steps to stepping out of that? Or
Yeah, great question. So I really recommend for folks to start thinking about themselves as the hero of their own story, right? That no one is coming to save you, unfortunately,
mm-hmm.
right? And you're not here. Unfortunately, it's impossible to save somebody else. We can
Mm,
support them, we can encourage them, we can empower them, but we cannot save them. And that's
mm,
also almost a little bit like not trusting them in their own ability to live this
mm-hmm.
life fully, and not giving them the respect and the honor that another person deserves when we try to go in and save and maybe even meddle a little bit into their lives, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So for us to be the hero of our own story and to really think about it in that way, that we have the power to make decisions in every moment. We have the power to make a different decision if something isn't working for us. And of course, we also have community and support system that we can tap into to help us along the way. And then to help, disengage us, detach from that helper role to save other people, it is also to see that other person as the hero of their own story, that they also get to make decisions and to be on a path and live this life that is both really difficult and really painful and also very beautiful as well.
Mm.
And that when we meddle and when we try to save them, when we help too much, then we're actually preventing them from living.
Ah, well said. I got emotional from that, just thinking about
Mm,
my sister and both of us going through the whole postpartum period of 6 months apart from each other. And when I get really passionate about women's health, maternal mental health, I to- yeah, I think I needed to hear that this idea that other people can also be the hero of their own story, and they are.
yes, yes.
That's really empowering. Do you see certain traits or qualities of folks who fall into the kind of overgivers, overfixers in mental health specifically, or why do we
Mm-hmm,
find this path? And I mean,
mm-hmm.
obviously a strength, and it makes sense that we go into this field, but oh man, what do we do if we're stuck in
Yes,
that?
yes, yes. It took a while for me to really fully, I'm sure there's still layers, but for me to really fully like own the fact, right? That there is a wounded helper inside of me. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And um and not in a good way. that I was trying to help from my place of woundedness. And I do think from my observation, it's not mine alone, but there's many other um, therapists and psychologists who have talked about this and written about this as well. Karen Moroda's book on the analyst vulnerability really speaks to this, and I really love her work. And she talks about there's so many of us come into this field, sometimes unconsciously and sometimes subconsciously, because we have some sort of wounding in our past, in our childhood,
Mm-hmm.
of feeling quite guilty that we couldn't fix enough of what we saw around us. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this gets pretty
Mm-hmm.
deep and complex. I'm definitely,
Yes.
you know, we can't understand this topic without understanding that culture plays a big role in this. I can
Yes.
imagine
Yeah.
intersectionality. Um,
Absolutely.
and our parents and how we were raised, especially for you as an immigrant. And of course, coming to America and having to learn so many things, all the sacrifices that your parents made. I guess I'm curious for folks who are this is kind of the opposite. So if you're in that role, whether you're in the victim role or you're the maybe under functioning,
Mm-hmm.
that was a kind of a new thing I learned in my kind of postpartum. I realized I could over function for a couple of days and then completely under function. And I was on maternity leave and just really trying to do the bare minimum, which was not serving me. And the people
Mm-hmm.
around me were helping me a lot, especially my sister, my partner, parents. I felt like that was a really kind of helpless position too. Like, oh, I can't do anything. I had this awful thing that happened to me. How do people get out of that role other than maybe what you've already shared about recognizing you're the hero? If how do people even realize that they are in that victim mindset? I know that's tough.
Mm-hmm. That is really tough. Absolutely. And I've been there too in many different ways, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of like poor me and wallowing in
Mm-hmm.
my own self-pity, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why me? Why does this happen to me? I can't do anything about it, right? And part of that is just recognizing when we do step into those roles. There's almost this sort of shift in our own physical bodies and how we are feeling and sensations, right? And the narrative and the stories that we play in our minds. And I think over time, just becoming really good at identifying, oh, here I am in that victim place again, in that helplessness, in that place where I feel like I can't make anything different or that I can't accept things as they are. That's the other really tricky piece, right? That if I can accept, like in your circumstance, if I can accept that I'm just really drained, if I can just
Mm-hmm.
accept the fact that this is incredibly hard and that I can accept that I'm not alone in this, that many people go through this, and that I can really lean into my support system right now, and that I know this will pass, things never stay the same, this will change. But
Right.
right now, let me just really, cozy up with my family and my support network and really let them care for me right now and accept that care and accept that vulnerability, then I think sometimes we can actually come out of that place a little bit quicker than if we were fighting it. I shouldn't feel this way. I feel incompetent, right? Or I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not being a great mom. And those kinds of narratives actually, I think, gets us more stuck in that place of victimhood. Like, this shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
happen to me. I don't accept this as it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Motherhood, the rug was just pulled out from underneath my feet and I like fell flat on my face. And there was a lot of, well, I'm a psychologist. I know all this stuff. I know radical acceptance. I practice mindfulness. I
Yes.
understood postpartum depression, anxiety. I've treated it before. I should know. I should do better. And
Yeah.
I am really curious if I actually didn't have the background that I did, if that actually would have been more helpful. Just because there was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of shoulds. There's a lot of like, what is wrong with me? I should be past this already. I should be over it already.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's really helpful. Is there things that you wish more people knew about this topic? I know this is part of your practice. These are the types of clients you see. These are the types um, clients that everyone in your practice sees. Are there other insights or patterns you've gathered from, I guess, folks who are overgivers, overfixers, and what's been really useful for them as far as therapy techniques or, yeah, different types of therapy? I'm so curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one of the first things is just that awareness is so important and so helpful. If we
Mm-hmm.
can just keep repeating same patterns over and over again and be aware
Mm-hmm.
of it. And oftentimes clients come to us is because they've really got fed up and they're really tired, they're really drained, living lives that are just unfulfilling. They have
Mm-hmm.
this feeling that there must be something more. So it's a great place to start, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
from there, one of the things I like to share with my clients in preparing to change, once they realize that this pattern is there, that they tend to overgive, um, and that they would like to shift and change things, is also that the journey to change can be really challenging, and that people in their lives might be protesting the change, right?
Oh,
Because
interesting.
it's worked really well for, again, other people, that they are
Right.
overgivers and overfunctioners, either, whether it's at workplace or in their families,
Mm-hmm.
in their friendships. It's really nice to have an overgiver around.
Yep.
Right? And
Absolutely.
so if you were to change, and when you do, people around you might not be very supportive of that, and they might protest and they might complain and they might criticize, and to be prepared for that as well. And that sometimes these relationships that you currently have may not be able to come along with you as you shift and change into a more healthy pattern, and that some relationships might end, and that is sometimes the cost of change and transformation, and that becomes really hard. And same thing with therapists, as we're talking about, right? A lot of us come into this field with this uh, need, even to give, this need to help, this wanting to care for others. And then when we start shifting, it's also, I often tell my colleagues and my friends, like, don't be surprised if you also get some pushback from the field, from your
So
colleagues.
true.
Yeah,
Right.
you might lose some clients. That might be the case when you start to
Mm-hmm.
set really healthy boundaries, when you communicate your needs, when you show up more authentically and more fully yourself. There could very well be some relationships that won't sustain that. However, you're also making room for other relationships that will come into your life that can see you as fully who you are, right? With all the needs that you have, as well as all that you have to give, and able to meet this new relationship with a lot of mutuality. There's going to be a natural give and take. So I tell my clients this, I tell my colleagues this as they start the journey, because it's nice to know that ahead of time.
Yeah.
Um, and it's in some ways an informed consent if you want to do this change. You have to be ready and willing to take on some of the risk as well. It is not
Mm-hmm.
for the faint of heart. It is a very brave and courageous journey to go
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I think that's so important going forward with this, is knowing that if you're going to start this journey, things are going to change in your life, including your relationships, probably especially your relationships. If you think of all the people who've benefited from your overgiving and over
on.
sacrifices, I think a lot about, transgenerational cycles and cycles that have not been broken. If you think of, there's so many like tropes, like oldest daughter. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
thinking about like my clients, if they were to announce to their family and make it this like official thing, people would be like, excuse me, you putting yourself first means that we're going to suffer. Do you have any ideas for, is there like a prompt or almost like a template that people can say? I'm just kind of thinking out loud, like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
by the way, that's something I used to do, but I'm in therapy, I'm working on setting
Mm-hmm.
healthier boundaries because I've learned I get
Mm-hmm.
really burned out. Just curious if
Mm-hmm.
you have any like sayings that have worked well for you or your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where the balance of overgiving um, and overtaking can really shift, is if in these moments, as you also have to make some assessment about who you can talk to about this, right? And who is ready for this
Good
kind of
point.
conversation, right? But if they are, and they could be a really great support system for you, one of the things that I encourage my clients to do is to actually ask them for help, to keep you accountable or to help
Like
support
that.
you. That's actually a great way of reversing that role, right? Of saying,
Mm-hmm.
I have been over giving. I'm noticing that this is something that I do, to the point of resentment, to the point of burnout, to the point where I start ghosting you because I've given too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to keep doing that because our relationship is so important. So I like to ask for your help as I go on this journey to become healthier. Could you keep me more accountable? Could you, if you start noticing that I'm setting good boundaries, could you encourage me to keep doing that? Right? So I'm actually asking that person for help. Oftentimes get them on board and on your team. They're much more supportive.
Valuing the relationship and saying, hey, I'm doing this because I care about a relationship. Wow, Jennifer, this has been so lovely to meet with you. I'm so glad we got to do this. I am looking
Me
forward to
too.
talking again. Any last words you want to share with our audience, and then how people could either reach you or find you on social media or elsewhere?
Yeah, just thank you again so much for this opportunity to talk with you. It's so lovely to have this platform to share with your listeners as well. And it's definitely a passion topic of mine, so I can talk on for hours. And so
Yeah,
definitely would love to have other continued conversations. And folks
absolutely.
can find me and my practice at thriveforthepeople.com. And we are a group practice located in Ballard. And we offer individual, couples, and now team therapy as well, because one of our
Oh,
therapists also
cool.
sees teams. And
Nice.
in our couples work, as you can imagine, this oftentimes come up with couples dynamics as well, where couples are like, I do so much for the relationship, and I don't feel
Yep.
like you contribute enough. And so that's definitely the way that we work with our couples as well. It's really thinking about how to empower both partners to really express themselves, to come from that really healthy place of boundaries as well as assertiveness with each other. And healthy interdependence is what we're trying to do. So
Hmm.
folks can definitely find us on our website.
Great. And also, just to add, Jennifer always has really cool events going on too. For women, you have retreats
Thank
happening,
you.
and I love
Yes,
seeing
yes.
what you've been posting. So, definitely
Thank
things to
you.
keep updated there if you're in the Seattle area. All right,
Yes.
everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a good rest of your day. Stay kind. Bye bye.